This isn't just another injury report. This is a reckoning. When Caitlin, Clark's own father, stepped forward, shattering his silence with a trembling voice and a heavy heart, it sent shock waves through the basketball world. He had stayed out of his daughter's professional life for years, content to let her game speak for itself. But this time he couldn't. Not after what he saw. Not after watching his daughter again leave the court limping, clutching her groin, eyes fighting back, tears beneath the blinding lights. The image wasn't just haunting, it was unacceptable. What followed was even more unthinkable. Her personal doctor stepped into the public eye, a figure who had known Clark's body better than any coach, trainer, or league physician. And what he revealed wasn't just a diagnosis. It was an indictment. This wasn't a new injury, he explained. This was something that had been lurking in the shadows for years, quietly worsening, while Clark carried the weight of women's basketball on her back. The groin injury, he said, was only the tip of the iceberg. Suddenly, every game she played this season took on a new light. Every awkward landing, every slowed sprint, every forced smile during post-game interviews. It wasn't just fatigue. It wasn't just rookie adjustment, it was pain. Real grinding, unrelenting pain. And she had been pushing through it with the same fire that made her a legend at Iowa and a savior for the Indiana Fever. But the cost, it was no longer just hers to bear. Now the world had to face it, too. This wasn't a case of overhyping an injury or exaggerating a minor concern. This was a whistleblow from the one person who had nothing to gain and everything to risk by speaking out. And when he did, the implications were deafening. Because if this was true, if Clark had been silently carrying this burden while the league marketed her face, sold her name, and flooded arenas in her wake, then this wasn't just a medical revelation. It was a betrayal. And just like that, the basketball community found itself staring into a mirror it didn't want to hold. How long had this been going on? Who knew? Who looked the other way? Because as it turns out, Caitlin Clark's story wasn't just about a star pushing through adversity. It was about a system willing to let her suffer in silence for the sake of ticket sales and TV ratings. From the very beginning of her rookie season, the numbers told one story, but the footage told another. Clark was electric on paper, putting up 19.2 points, 8.4 assists, and nearly 6 rebounds per game. But eagle-eyed fans and former pros started noticing something off. Her footwork looked stiffer, her crossovers less fluid. She wasn't fading, but she was changing. And not in the way players evolve. This was something deeper, something forced. The conversation slowly shifted. Was it the pressure? Was she exhausted? Or was something wrong physically that no one wanted to acknowledge? Behind the stats and the hype, people began asking, was Caitlin Clark truly okay? And then came the answer, like a slow, chilling realization creeping in through the cracks. No, she wasn't. Her explosive bursts were fewer. Her minutes were managed more tightly. And those iconic full-court drives she made look effortless in college, they were now strategic, measured. It was as if her body had limits she wasn't allowed to admit, but had no choice but to obey. The contrast from her Iowa dominance, the grind of the WNBA, was no longer subtle. It was screaming to be noticed. And yet, through it all, Clark never complained. Not once. She showed up, smiled for the cameras, signed autographs, and showed her the dreams of a league starving for a superstar. But behind that stoic exterior, her body was waving a red flag. And only now are we beginning to understand the cost of her silence. The step up from college to the pros is brutal for anyone. But for Caitlin Clark, it was an entirely different beast. Most rookies come in with time to adjust, a cushion, a moment
To breathe. Clark.
She was expected to save a franchise and resuscitate an entire league on day one. The WNBA's schedule is compact, the travel relentless, and the physicality unmatched. And yet, Clark was tossed into the fire with barely a whisper. Concern for her well-being. Her debut season wasn't just a sports story.
It
was a spectacle. Media appearances, brand campaigns, and fan expectations created a perfect storm. Clark was never allowed to be a rookie. She had to be a miracle. And when you combine that level of expectation with the unforgiving grind of professional sports, something's got to give. And what gave was her body. It wasn't just the groin. Medical professionals now say her entire physical system had been under duress for months, maybe years. The kind of wear and tear that builds slowly, silently, until it erupts, but no one
saw it.
Or maybe they did and chose not
To speak.
That possibility is what's so chilling, because if even a generational talent like Caitlin Clark can be ground down by the machine of professional
Sports. What does that say about the
system, what does that say about us, the fans who demanded more highlights, more points, more everything without stopping to ask if she was okay? But the most damning question of all, was someone keeping this hidden? The pressure to keep Clark playing was immense.
She
wasn't just a player, she was a product, a movement. Every game she sat meant fewer tickets sold, fewer jerseys moved, fewer viral clips to fuel the league's rising relevance. And in that ecosystem, transparency became the first casualty. Whispers began surfacing. Was a league soft-pedaling her injury for the sake of optics? Those closest to the situation began questioning whether commercial interests had trumped medical honesty. Were pain levels downplayed? Were warning signs ignored? The idea that Clark might have been encouraged, implicitly or otherwise, to push through has ignited a firestorm of ethical debate. Even sports medicine professionals have weighed in, suggesting that young athletes, especially women, often feel pressure to minimize pain to meet performance expectations. And when the spotlight is as blinding as it's been for Clark, that pressure becomes unbearable. What we're left with is a disturbing thought.
did
Caitlin Clark feel she couldn't afford to speak up? That being honest about her pain would be seen as weakness, not just by the league but by the fans who idolize her. Her style of play, the slashing drives, the deep threes, the whip smart assist, wasn't just beautiful. It was punishing. Every pivot, every fake, every hard cut placed stress on her joints and muscle groups.
point guards.
Are already under enormous strain.
Add
In Clark's relentless pace and usage rate, and you're talking about an athletic workload that borders on inhumane. Her biomechanics have been under the microscope for years, with some analysts suggesting she has movement patterns that, while effective, might predispose her to certain types of injuries. In college, those red flags were theoretical. In the WNBA, they're reality, and the groin injury, it's not an isolated incident. It's a symptom of years of pushing her body beyond what most athletes ever experience. Combine that with the increased physicality of the league, and you've got a powder cake waiting to blow. Medical experts have begun using Clark's case in broader discussions about players' safety and preventive care. The lesson: sometimes greatness comes at a hidden cost.
and if
You don't address it early, if you let the show go on without pause, the body will eventually send its own message. Loud, painful, and unavoidable.
Now.
That message is echoing across the WNBA. Like a siren. What makes this story even more complex is the tangled web of medical personnel, team doctors, personal doctors, league officials, each with different priorities, different pressures, and different versions of the
Truth.
And in the middle of it all, a 22-year-old rookie with the world on her shoulders. Legal analysts have weighed in pointing out that athlete medical information is protected by law. So when Clark's position went public, it wasn't just unusual. It was urgent.
It was a
Line in the sand. Someone finally putting a player above the politics. But it also raises a question. How many others knew?
And if they knew, why?
Didn't they say anything sooner?
The
Relationship between medical truth and corporate interest is murky.
when
Millions are on the line, and the league's most marketable asset is hurting, whose voice gets heard. The players, the sponsors, the executives. Because in that war of interest, the athlete's health can easily become collateral damage. And Clark's story, it's quickly becoming the blueprint for what not to do when handling generational talent. And now the basketball world is grappling with a reckoning that goes far beyond one athlete's injury. It's about accountability or the lack of it. Because if the NBA's brightest star can be failed so publicly, so comprehensively, then how many others have suffered silently without a doctor willing to speak up or a father willing to break protocol? Caitlin Clark's